Welcome to The Business Behind Your Business, the podcast where we delve into the financial strategies and insights that drive success for small and medium-sized business owners. I'm your host, Paul Sweeney, and in each episode we bring you expert guests who share practical advice, real-world experiences, and actionable tips to empower you on your business journey. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting out, get ready to uncover the secrets to success and gain valuable insights into the business behind your business. Okay, as a business owner, you are working hard to build up the equity in your business, to build up that cash flow. But it's like putting all your eggs in one basket. You've got all your energy or your time, your effort into one asset. And if something does go wrong with that asset, or the economy changes or the legislation changes, you're putting it all at risk. We're always talking about diversifying your risk and putting your assets into different classes, different buckets of protection, and building up separate revenue streams. That's part of what we're about with wealth creation as a business owner. Now, how do we unpack that strategy, or what is the right strategy? Well, we're going to tap into one of the experts in the field, Charles Zerafa, and find out a bit more about what is a good strategy for a business owner. But before we dive into that, let's find out a bit more about Charles. Charles is from Integrity Finance Australia. He's been in business, in corporate banking. He's a finance broker. He's an advisor. Works on strategy. I'm just looking at some of the things he's been dealing with. He's put together some big deals over time, helping build some big assets, multinationals through to small businesses. I think he's done it all. So, Charles, welcome to the microphone.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Love the intro.
Yeah. Well, it's good to have you here. And look, it's great to hear different aspects because, when we're running a business, we're often one person and we come at it from one angle and we know what we do. And the business owner we hope they are very good at the skill that they have brought to the business, but they're not necessarily good at understanding all the strategy about wealth creation and diversification. And I think that's where we need to tap in to somebody who has been there and does advise on that on a regular basis. So, Charles, what is the key benefit to a business owner for looking outside of their business for building up their wealth, perhaps through property?
Oh, look, good question. There's lots of different ways of approaching that, and I sort of specialise in customising that question to their particular situation. But owners that are generating a little bit of income and starting to invest in different asset classes need to consider a lot of things as far as do they invest in their own owner-occupied premises and go and buy their own head office? Do they invest in commercial, residential, get into syndicates? There's lots of different ways to approach property investment, and there's lots of considerations. The way I start with the client's idea, as far as most people have got an idea on what they want to do, and then I sort of guide that discussion and make sure that the strategy that they're coming up with is optimal for their position. So you need to consider deposits, asset classes, locations, and you got to weigh up and do your own due diligence and not just rest on your own narrow scope, so to speak. So, the initial buying your own owner-occupied property or investing in using that property for tax benefits or for maximising your deductions, getting a portfolio that grows an asset class and grows your wealth is probably the main things that people try to achieve.
And look, I think it's one of those struggles that a lot of business owners have is that they know that they should be doing it, but they're not sure about the right way to go about it. And there's a fair bit of resentment every time the rental invoice comes in every month around how much is this actually costing me? Surely there's a better way. And look, one of the obvious things is instead of paying somebody else, then why don't you pay yourself in some form for an asset that you're going to build up that's going to, I think, go up in value, or we hope it's going to go up in value, but it's also going to provide perhaps a future revenue stream for you, which is independent of your business.
Absolutely. And it's a very common investment strategy and one that we do with our clients all the time. Some of the things for consideration is obviously not buying the asset in the same entity as your operating business for liability purposes. So for asset protection purposes, your accountants are going to advise you to set up a special purpose vehicle, whether it's shares the same directorship. There's just a layer of protection there, and it's a separate legal entity. But there's all kinds of things to come into play, and I don't claim to be an accountant, but a lot of my clients do use unit trusts, family trusts, and they also look at the super funds and using your super funds as a deposit to actually buy a place instead of paying huge stamp duties on a property, because that's a big consideration. The stamp duty cost on a large commercial property can be a hindrance. So unlocking your super funds to help you get into a property is a common problem. A common strategy that's being used. There's pros and cons of doing that as well. You can't get access to the equity if you're buying the super fund, but at the same time, if you have it outside of super, it can be bought, sold. The equity can be reused as it grows, and there's lots of pros and cons, and you've got to weigh up what's best for you.
Yeah, so there's a few different options there. And look, you've mentioned super, and look, we're going to keep a pretty general discussion here, but everybody is paying super on their wages, and you're building up your superannuation balance. So one way that you can actually achieve, I guess, building up wealth outside of your business, but something that you control is having your super fund or a super fund buy the property, perhaps the property that your business is renting at the moment or potentially going to rent, and then paying, your super contributions go in there, funding the purchase of that asset, and of course your business is paying rent into your super. So I think you're getting a double growth there. But you've mentioned some other options as well that outside of that. I think everybody jumps to super, and look, that super is one really good area, but it may not be the thing for somebody straight away because they may not have enough balance there. So what are some of the alternatives? Because you mentioned borrowing as to get that acquisition.
Yeah, well, I sort of reverse engineer it, and I say to a company, when I'm talking to my clients, I say, well, how long are you going to be there? How long did it take your business to outgrow the current space? If you go buy a property, are you planning on expanding in the next 3 to 5 years or medium term future? Will you potentially outgrow this in 10 years' time? So you've got to take a little bit of a longer outlook when you're making a purchase like this, because the better you can execute it, for example, is the better. There's lots of multiple benefits by buying something that's appropriate for your business and allows for that growth. So we find the location, ask them the purchase price, and then based on an estimate purchase price, we work out stamp duties, what the acquisition costs will be, what the relocation costs will be, and we like you do feasibility on a development project. You got to do a feasibility on what it would look like to relocate your business to a new premises and acquire it and have it sitting there as an investment. So when you run those numbers, it sometimes shapes your decisions. And an example of that is a client that wanted to buy something that was a little bit out of their price range, but he just gave himself a goal and said, I can't save that deposit and have that much cash aside to make that purchase right now, but I'm going to give myself a goal. I'm going to sign up a 3-year lease. I'm going to save up this much in 3 years, and then we're going to revisit this purchase back then. And yes, I know property prices might go up and I might have to save a touch more, but 3 years is more than enough time to save up that deposit for that acquisition in that time frame. So it's a little plan that they had. We spoke to the tax accountant on how to maximise that savings and put them in offset accounts and reduce business loans, and then they went and redraw all of that later to then go and do the purchase at that point in time. So that's why I keep coming back to the whole, you got to do what's right for you and your position, and everyone's position is unique. But that's one strategy that works quite well if you don't have the cash to make that initial purchase now.
Yeah. And look, I'm glad you mentioned that strategy, and you talked about actually working through the scenarios, and you mentioned about that question about how long will it be for you to outgrow your current premises. And that's something I see a trap is that people get, I guess, emotionally attached to the office they have, the factory they're working in at the moment, but it may not actually be the right long-term position for them. So what are some of the ways of overcoming that issue that you've encountered?
Well, as I said, I've got a lot of experience in drawing upon this for my clients because it's something we talk about quite often. One of them is actually acquiring a bigger space than you need that you can grow into, subletting out the back of the back premises, for example, or even just for storage. There's lots of places that just want to sublet out, not to an operating business, but just for actual storage. So other businesses are outgrowing their own, and they just need an external area to lease out for overflow of stock, for example, and exporters and all those kind of businesses. So one of my clients bought a property that was a little bit bigger than what he needed, and he sublet out that other space. He sublet it out to someone that just wanted to store their stock. They knew someone within their network as well, so it was all safe, secure. They did an arm's length lease. They got a property manager involved. They did it all the right way, even though they knew each other. And so subletting out the back end of the space, buying something that's a little bit bigger can be one of the strategies, and that works quite well. And another client of mine bought a property where he knew the property next door, and he basically said, I'm going to buy this, and when the property next door comes up on the market, I'm going to acquire that. And my long-term goal is to extend my factory out once I can acquire that property next door. So that was part of his long-term strategy as well. And so there's lots of ways of trying to foresee what's going to happen in the future and plan for it.
Yeah, and look, there's a couple of really good points you've raised there about looking beyond what your current needs are and looking at what might your capacity be in the future. So buying something where you've got room to grow into it. I've seen a few people do that very successfully. I've also seen a few people who have sort of done the opposite or fallen into that trap of only buying the capacity they need right now, and they've very quickly outgrown that facility. And yes, that strategy of buying the adjoining property, I've actually seen that work really, really well. And often when you combine the two properties together, the value of the two individual units is amplified.
Absolutely.
And you've got one point of contact, one location. You can do a lot more with those two adjoining properties compared to having smaller stuff all over the place, which adds to your operating costs, but also is not fit for purpose. So, that's a good strategy there. I think what I'm hearing is the need to actually think through and plan. So there's a lot more of a planning process, and it seems to be more of a long-term outlook, but also not a short period for making a decision. I think what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to take a longer term approach and actually work through, make sure we get all the information before we make a decision.
Absolutely. Rushing into a decision can sometimes just stops you from considering all the different alternatives, and you can easily just not consider all the options and maximize the opportunity that's in front of you. Using buyer's agents is another thing. A lot of clients try to acquire properties on their own and negotiate and think they understand the market, but the commercial market's really, really diverse. And it's not like a suburb or residential where there's lots of different recent sales and comparables, and it's more predictable. Commercial property is a lot more complicated. So using a buyer's agent to actually negotiate the right purchase price and acquire the property that ticks all their boxes. I've seen a lot of commercial buyers agents do a fantastic job just basically working with the owner and saying, I'm going to keep on hunting until I find you exactly what you're after. You need this size property and all the checklists of everything that they need for their business at that price point that they can afford too. So that's one thing I'd actually also recommend, is that if you're struggling to find a place that fits all your needs, reach out to an expert in that commercial property space that can add that value, because we're talking millions of dollars of property acquisition and purchase prices. For a small fee, they can save you a lot of money, and they pay for themselves in the negotiation more times than not. And let alone they always try to put pressure on the vendor to try to pick it up at as lower price as possible. So there's multiple benefits for using a specialist and an expert that buys and sells commercial assets all the time. So there's the saving aspect of making sure that you've got enough money, but there's the execution. And the execution of the purchase is just as important in my mind as well.
Yeah, so and that's some great advice there, because I think it's, for a lot of people, it is one of the biggest purchases, particularly apart from their own home, if they're going down that track, but it's one of the biggest acquisitions they're going to make. We tend to put a lot more effort into, and I've heard this example quite a few times, people spend more time obsessing over the mobile phone plan they're going to take up than the time and care that they put into something like a property purchase. And I think it's a recipe for disaster, because it's such a big item. Look, you've got to use somebody with the experience. And as you said, they do that day after day. That's what they're good at. That's what their skill set is. And it's going to save you money. It could prevent you from impulse buying the wrong property, perhaps, or at least make sure that the properties you're looking at are actually within the scope of what you've decided you need for your business.
They'll get a better result than what you can on your own, is from my experience. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
even just working with an agent themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, there's the time cost of you trying to do all of that yourself as well, because it's taking you away from running and operating and supervising your business. So, multiple benefits there. So, buyers agents are a key thing. Now, commercial property, residential property. Look, everybody sort of lumps them together, but I'm guessing there's a difference in how you would approach financing the purchase of a commercial property.
Yeah, I like to get pre-approvals a lot for the commercial property purchases, and it's easy to without doing a valuation. Just the lease terms are pretty set in place, so they know what the lease, what market rental is for that kind of asset type and that purchase price. And just being prepared and like I said before, doing the little bit of due diligence, understanding how much that acquisition costs are going to be, considering the relocation costs. Quite often, I structure the finance in a way that suits their cash flow too. And what that means is a lot of times when you're moving and relocating, there's going to be a disturbance to the operating cash flow. So just going interest only on the first year or two until you settle into it and get back to the cash flows that you were achieving before you moved in. So yeah, that business interruption can take just being very considered about the finance and just being smart. And just like I said, I think it's just part of the due diligence process to make sure you've got a pre-approval in place. The last thing you want to do is go and put a deposit down on a commercial property and then go to a financier and say, no, you can't afford it based on or it's not even the affordability. Sometimes it can get declined for a number of reasons that the people don't realise themselves. So yeah, be prepared, get a pre-approval in place, understand your numbers, understand your location, understand why you're doing it, and just be really thoughtful and considered about that acquisition, because as you pointed out, it's a significant purchase and an investment. And just like you'd approach not any big decision, by doing it systematically, getting the right team of people around you to help you make your own decision. I never force a client into making any decision. I tell them the options that are available to them and work through that with them and try to structure the finance according to what suits them and their business and takes into consideration everything that they're trying to achieve.
Now, yeah, so we've got using a buyer's agent, having a look at the tax side of it. So you're consulting here your buyer's agent, your accountant and your tax advisor. You're looking at your finance. So you're planning for this in advance. So you're talking to Charles in advance. Now, you mentioned something in there when you were talking about the cash flow, which a lot of people ignore completely, and that is the relocation costs. In terms of, and you mentioned the impact on revenue during the move. How much of an impact is that relocation cost or that time period on the cash flow scenario?
It all depends on the industry type. Some people, there's very minimal interruption. Engineering companies that have just got to move machinery, they actually can get efficiencies immediately, but there's an initial machinery location cost or installation costs, and that's the upfront cost that's attributed to it, but their cash flow doesn't get disrupted. But other businesses where they've got a lot of changing staff, or there's a lot of things to organise, and their people are actually sidetracked with the relocation and can't be as efficient as they once were in their previous location. Well, it's going to take a while to get those systems up and running and get them, taking the benefits of the new space, for example. So yeah, it all depends on the industry and the dynamics of the business on how much impact that has. But like I said, you do have to take that into consideration and say, will my business suffer from this relocation? Is there an impact? And try to quantify it as much as you can. And be prepared for it. Make sure you've got that little bit of money set aside for it, and that you don't leave yourself too thin, especially if you're putting a lot into the purchase, using a lot of your cash flow for the deposit and the initial acquisition costs.
Yeah, that's some great advice there. So, Charles, how often? How early before the time that they need to buy or move to a new property should somebody start looking and start working with somebody like yourself?
Well, working with my existing clients, I just say to them, keep the discussion open. And if you're serious about making the move, come as early as possible, and we can go get just an indicative term sheet and show you what the repayments and the rates and how much cash deposit would be required for a purchase at that price point. So give me it may be a $3 million, maybe a $30 million purchase. Don't make assumptions. Come as early as possible. We'll give you a really great indication of what the costs will be, what those acquisition costs will be, what the repayments, what the rates, what the terms will be, and it fleshes out that conversation, because too many business owners make assumptions and they're wrong. They're totally wrong. They think they can't, and it goes both ways. They underestimate what the repayments are going to be, and it ends up being a surprise to them and changes the dynamic. Or they overestimate it and think they can't get into a property when in fact they can if they just structured the finance in a different way. So engaging as early as possible. We workshop that. We get a term sheet. We bring that term sheet back to you with all the various options on how you can structure the loan. So it gives you the information that you need to go out and start that serious journey on acquiring something. And commercial property is not like residential. You don't have to sign something immediately as soon as you get a contract. So once we've done that due diligence, when you finally secure something and put a deposit down, or holding deposit, for example, or start making a real offer, I ask the clients to send me a copy of the contract to sale, and we try to formalise that as soon as possible. Make sure you've got your financials updated and a checklist of information the banks will want to go to formal approval, but we can quickly move to formal approval once we've done that due diligence. But I'm just encouraging people not to go and make a deposit and then go seek their finance. Engage as early as possible, because that'll make sure you have those discussions about loan structuring and gets all those assumptions out of the way, and you're sort of dealing with real facts.
And look, you get a better outcome when you're prepared. Too many experiences of working with clients who the phone call is, I've made a purchase of this property, I've put down the deposit, we're organising finance, and we need all of this stuff in a hurry.
Correct.
And do you think we can afford it? Well, yes. You're not going to get the best outcome working that way. The approach that you've described, the approach that Charles has laid out for us of being prepared, doing your planning, doing your due diligence before, doing your cash flows, your forecasting, understanding what your needs are going to be. A lot of work beforehand, but a much better outcome at the end. And of course, it's about creating long-term wealth for you as a business owner. So using your business profits, investing in wealth creation strategy, property, commercial property, particularly if it's something that you're going to be renting from yourself. Yep. So it's a great way to go. And look, don't go it alone. That's the key thing we're hearing. I often say this: don't try and be the expert in this or many different fields, because we know you're an expert in your business, but you're not the expert in every aspect of these businesses. So, Charles, with the finance and actually even helping with understanding, can I afford this property, and working with people such as buyer's agents, great advice there. So, if you'd like to hear more from Charles, or you'd like to actually engage him to actually help you get the best outcome for a property purchase, Charles, how do we get in touch with you?
Yep, my website is charleszerafa.com.au, or I've got multiple profiles on LinkedIn, Charles Zerafa as a finance broker, or Integrity Finance Commercial and Business Finance Division is my company page as well. So Great. Reach out on LinkedIn or jump on the website, and you'll find all my details are there.
Yeah, great, fantastic. And as always, we'll put the links to Charles' contact details and website in the show notes for you to follow. So check those out later, and also check out the show notes in more detail and get in touch with Charles and just find out how you can extract some more value out of your business and grow your wealth long term. So Charles, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Paul. Enjoyed the discussion. Thanks again.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Business Behind Your Business. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and valuable for your business journey. Before we go, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favourite platform. Share it with fellow business owners who could benefit, and send in your burning questions, because we love hearing from you. Missed any of our previous episodes, or looking for additional resources to help grow your business? Head over to our website at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. There you'll find our full archive of past episodes, along with show notes, transcripts, and links to valuable resources mentioned in each episode. Your journey to business success continues at thebusinessbehindyourbusiness.com. Until next time, stay inspired, stay informed, and keep building the business of your dreams.